I am Sergeant Teresa Magera. I am the training and recruiting sergeant for the Madison Police Department. I've been with I've been a police officer for almost 16 years, I guess. And I've been with Madison just over 10. I am in charge of our recruits in the academy, as well as our training staff. And then I do all things recruiting, backgrounds, and our hiring process as well. So I am here today to talk about a little bit about who we at the Madison Police Department are, how it all started, and also to provide you with some successful strategies and actionable things you can do to take back to your agencies. So this is who we are. As you can see, I've broken down our rank and the number of women in each of those ranks, and we are well represented across all ranks. I think our lowest one, we just had 2 female promotions in the last couple of months to sergeant. And other than that, everything else is right around or above our 28% significantly in some areas. So we are well represented across all ranks. But I can tell you it was not always like that. I had to dig deep in the vault of information and call some of our former chiefs to get this information because I was not around in the 1960s. However, the typical profile of a police officer in the 1960s was a white male, no college education, and it was post-military service. And if you see the pictures, these are actual officers in our academy, and then also officers that graduated from our academy. And you will see that they are all the same profile. It was a nuclear cloud of cigarette smoke, military tattoos, and everyone in the room basically looked like everyone else. So we were no different than any other department in the country at that time. Our chief, David Cooper, was promoted in 1973, and he was really the one that started this trend for us. He knew that at MPD, we couldn't do homage to community policing if we were all cut from the same cloth. So his ideas and really his implementation of these ideas is how we became where we are today. So the first step was introducing education incentives and started building ideas from there, seeking out individuals that came from different backgrounds, educational levels. And really, that's when this began, this cultural sea change. It was extremely rocky. People were very upset, and they actually tried to remove Chief Cooper from office by doing a vote of no confidence. That's how upset the rank and file was. It created a huge internal strife in our department. So how did we get past that and get into this culture shift for our department? So Chief Cooper said that the first step was creating our own academy. So for us at Madison Police Department, our recruits attend their own academy versus a regional academy. And really prior to that, obviously, many of the applicants and many of the officers hired were from the military. And so we had a very militaristic program prior to 1973. That was changed to a more adult learning model. Chief Cooper recognized that we wanted conversations about cultural competence, about adversity, about ethical dilemmas, ethics. So we built our own program, and that was really the first step to tailoring to our community needs and wants. The next step that we decided that would be implemented was going to be incentivizing education reimbursement and pay for education. You might ask why. So people who are educated typically have a higher appreciation for the root cause of things. And so they're not satisfied with arresting their way out of disturbances. They have higher learning, problem-solving abilities, and things that we look for in patrol officers. We wanted a diverse workforce with education. So we began to recruit at colleges, looking for recruits that had college education. Targeting non-criminal justice majors and fairs. We didn't want that one-size-fits-all model. We wanted to teach critical thinking for these complex issues that officers were facing. So why do victims stay in domestic violence relationships versus just going to the call, servicing it, and being out of there? We sought out different backgrounds. So not recruiting at just criminal justice fairs, but also psychologists, sociology, social work, teaching majors, all of the things that law enforcement has to do in their day-to-day jobs. The next prong that Chief Cooper started attacking was the promotions. He made very purposeful promotions, putting women and people of color in prominent positions. He began to skip over seniority and look at more the educational background of that certain person versus how long they've been at the department. As I mentioned, officers were extremely critical of this, especially I'm sure as anyone can relate to the seniority factor of this. So that did create that high internal moral strife. And then finally, the last kind of part of that culture shift was really the rewriting of job descriptions. So prior to the 1970s, a lot of the job descriptions of a female police officer were almost this chauvinistic protectionism. So we're talking female officers could handle juvenile complaints or non-aggressive calls. It was your stereotypical men's work versus women's work. So once those job descriptions were created, it really equaled the playing field. So, as I mentioned, Chief Cooper took over in 1973. It wasn't until 1979 that we had our first female majority class. There were 9 women and 6 men in the class. And continuing on that, in 1990, we had 13 women. It wasn't a female majority class. However, you can see very vast levels of experience in this photo because many of these women went on to be, one is a chief, one was a retired captain from our department. And so this was a process to get there. So from 1979 to 1990, it still took work. It wasn't one that was going to just be changed overnight. So now I'd like to break down a little bit of our successful strategies and what has worked for us and also what maybe hasn't worked for us. So I'll go through all of these in particular slides, but just hitting the highlights are social media messaging, recruiting flyers. All of these things are things that we do as a department that are intentional and very inclusive. So I'll first start with our social media messaging. We do work with an outside advertising agency and we pay them for the ad on the right. So if you see the join the team and the apply now, it's a clickable ad. These are ads that are served up via geofencing. And if you know anything about geofencing, these were terms that I knew nothing about prior to becoming the recruiting sergeant. So essentially, we geofence locations that we want to target. So if we go to these career fairs, such as what we did in the middle here in September, we would geofence those areas, and then we would target those cell phones in that area. Sometimes people get angsty about targeting cell phones. We in no way, shape, or form at the police department get any cell phone numbers. It's not a privacy concern in any way. The advertising agency that we work with does it. But that is a way that we can target ads to specific people and cell phones that are in a certain region that attend your fair. So that is one of the ways that we do that. These are also images that we put on social media. So we have at our social media, it's not a team, but it's our PIO that really does a great job creating content for our social media. One thing that we have learned and is a challenge for our city agency is if you've ever heard of a site pixel, which is a tracking device that allows you to track who can come to your and how they get to your website. For us, our city IT won't allow that because it can open us up to malware and virus concerns, but that could be something that your agency might be able to use, or an external website. We also have to use our internal website. Continuing with our social media. So we also tend to highlight images, not only showing that inclusive nature, but also women in very prominent positions. So the image on the left is one of our female canine officers. The image in the middle is Assistant Chief Paige Valenta in front of our Pride Squad. And then the one on the right is a female patrol cop that we featured for a story. These are relatable images. So we try to use images that are not only relatable, but because we want people to view images of our officers and think, could that be me? I do use this term intentionality a lot, and I tend to use it a lot with any sort of meetings I have with commanders, because we want exposure at many levels, but we have to be intentional about how we do it, and particularly on social media. So one other tool that we like to use are these recruiting flyers. I am in charge of the academy, like I mentioned. So every year at the start of the academy, I ask each individual recruit to give me their why MPD statement. So why they chose to work for us. We then take their statement, we put it on a flyer, and we send all of these flyers out to their alma maters. We'll send them to their career services departments, the head of the CJ departments, the head of whatever department they came from. And we have gotten such positive feedback from this, because they're a way that we kind of give back to the career services people and say, hey, we hired this person. Thank you. We'd like to continue to build this relationship. So this is a great way for us also to take these to career fairs when we recruit. Colleges and universities getting on campus. So I have found that the bread and butter of getting quality applicants to actually show up to your tests or anything that you provide is to get into the classroom. This is typically free. Every professor that I've ever met has said, absolutely, take an hour of our time. We don't necessarily need this time. And they want to encourage that. I often set that up ahead of time, or ask my recruiters to set it up ahead of time. And I'll ask the instructor, pick any topic you want. To me, this isn't about a recruiting spiel. This is about telling, whether it be a social issue, whether it be a quote unquote taboo topic. I try to say nothing is taboo. I'm an open book. Feel free to talk to me about anything. And I train my recruiters to be like that as well, to not shy away from these really hard conversations. Once you get in the classroom and you start talking to people, they learn your style of policing and what you do. So it's really the golden opportunity, hands down. Internships. I'm also in charge of the internship program here. This is a huge recruiting tool for us. In 2020, we hired a class of 50 recruits, and we had 9 interns in the class. In 2021, COVID shut down our intern program, so we didn't have any interns. But in 2022, in our last class, they're graduating tomorrow, we hired 6 out of 41 in that class. So if you don't have an internship program, I would say that is an extremely positive recruiting tool. I can tell you that many people that get internships, I do the whole process. I interview them from start to finish and place them. They don't always want to be an officer. And many, because of their experience, go from wanting a different federal agency or some other even type of job, and they want to be officers for us. So that is a huge recruiting tool that we have. And then finally, I talk about on-site testing. So if you go to career fairs on colleges, I know some people don't like to recruit on college campuses, or you don't get much interest or generate interest. I try to encourage my recruiters to always offer on-site testing. It is a way for us to go to the candidate. It's completely free. At Madison, we require a Nelson-Denny test, which is a reading and comprehension test. And then we offer the physical agility test, which for us is just a number of sit-ups, push-ups, and a 1.5 mile run. Super easy. Every campus has a track and an outdoor facility. You just have to ask to get on the campus. And typically the Career Services Center can get you a room if you have a written test or some type of testing that you have to do. But that is one last step for them to complete the hiring process, and then they're in your process, and you grab those candidates that way. Some outreach. So Sergeant Hamilton, Meg Hamilton is on this, and she is a part of outreach and in charge of that unit. And so part of our outreach is we also have other units that do this work. So MPD cadet program. We have a public safety cadet program that is for 14 to 21 year old kids. Since 2015, when we restarted the program, we have hired 3 officers from our cadet program who are current police officers with us. So that is yet another way to do a different type of outreach with a different age group, and that's very structured towards law enforcement. We also partner as outreach with Girl Scouts of America, and they do Camp Hero. This is a summer program that is directed towards protective services. So careers in protective service fields such as police, fire, and EMS. So girls from kindergarten all the way up until 12th grade go attend this, whether it be a couple of days for the real young ones, or it's usually a couple of days for the older ones. And then the high schoolers, 9th to 12th grade, will be a week-long program. This is heavily reliant on volunteers, and officers are encouraged to, they get compensated for what we call MPPOA time, which is just like an earned time outside of their job, if it's outside of their work time, to go up and mentor and to teach courses on law enforcement, and then the fire department assists with the fire and EMS side of it. So it's a great recruiting tool for us as well, because many of the girls that attend Camp Hero will come on to be cadets for us. My next bit of outreach is with our internal organization called the Black Officer Coalition. And the Black Officer Coalition works with our recruiters and us in training on the multicultural officer recruitment effort. So this is a partnership with local minority organizations and our Black Officer Coalition group within MPD. We identify at training. So I identify a candidate that passes our written test, but may need extra support to stay committed to the process. Historically, for us, people of color and sometimes women don't show up for tests, because it's been proven, as anyone has ever read, that women typically apply for jobs that they are qualified for. And if they don't quite think that they're ready, they won't apply. And so if we see people that have an application, but then do a no-show on our process, we now hook them up with a mentor that will mentor them and kind of check in regularly with them to be successful or more successful in our process. We just started it within this last campaign season, and our applications just closed on Monday. So though it's a newer idea, it's something that we've already noticed that people are responding to, and we're already getting successful candidates that come back for a second opportunity with us. We partnered with Urban League of Madison, 100 Black Men of Madison, the NAACP, and then we also have an external Madison Community Police Foundation that facilitates a lot of our needs for our neighborhood officers, but they are going to take on a little bit of a role of this. So for instance, how we've used this in recruitment has been specifically, we had a candidate that was applying for our Accelerated Academy, or some people call them Lateral Academy. And she was from Alabama. She was a woman of color and could not afford the plane ticket to come up here and come up for the multiple things. So we reached out to the community, and they were going to sponsor her in order to get her to come to our tests and possibly compete in our process. She was not able to pass her background, and so we did not use that. However, the response we got from the community was a resounding yes, let us know how we can help you. And so that has been a great tool for us to identify and recognize moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, from even Chief Cooper's time, we continue to have our own police academy. It is run Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's paid, non-residential. We also don't require officers to live in the city. So that also has benefits, because many people that come to us sometimes have families that are up to an hour away, and relocating their whole family is not necessarily something that they want to do. So for us, that non-residency requirement in the city is also a huge bonus. The academy, we exceed our state standards by teaching 960 hours, which is approximately 24 weeks of instruction. We do an adult learning session, adult learn setting. It's a university versus the boot camp style. And we really realize and recognize that our people are our biggest asset. And so we try to show them, you're an adult, we treat you like an adult, and that supportive environment sets them up for success as they become an officer. We encourage critical thinking, and we also do a student-centered debrief model, which allows the student to really provide you with the feedback that you get. So you get a very individualized training program for each person. For our pre-service academy, some things that we do that continue to help build our female cadre of instructors. Our rifle week here is a 40-hour work week that is outside at the Dane County range. Typically in years past, and when I went through the academy over 10 years ago, all of the instructors were male and they were SWAT members, which can be very intimidating to people who either have never shot a gun, have never shot a rifle before. And so over the past few years, we have decided that we don't necessarily need just female firearms instructors. We just ask any females that are willing to come out and train and be on the line with our recruits. And so usually they don't have to be the best shooters. We ask that they are from the last couple of classes so that they're relatable. They're typically very young women who maybe aren't eligible to become an instructor. And so just for your knowledge, in 2019, we hold instructor courses for firearms instructors, and one female instructor put in. This past year, we just closed our process and 7 female instructors requested to be firearms instructors. And for us, that was huge because that means that what we're doing is working. The image on the right side of the screen of the female wearing olive pants, that's Emily Sampson, Officer Emily Sampson, and she's our lead DAT instructor. She teaches all of the defense and arrest tactics for our department and for every academy class since 2018. Prior to her, it has always been a male instructor. So for us at the academy, what we look at is placing females in prominent roles that aren't just the soft skills. This next slide discusses about our first women at training. So in 1998, Stephanie Bradley Wilson was our first in-service training sergeant. And she was also the first woman of color that was in our building in a position of rank. In 1998, we had our first academy director, Sandy Tooney. In 2000, it was Sherry Maples, and she was the first captain of training. And then for me, in 2019, I became the first academy sergeant. Mostly what we, I guess our model is that you need to practice what you preach. So if you want women in leadership roles and you want women leading your department, then you have to build that reputation and put women in those positions. It took 25 years from when Chief Cooper became chief until the first woman held a formal leadership position in training. So for many agencies, this is not a quick fix by any means. I don't want to say finally, but the last kind of tier that we talk about is our mentorship, and it is a formal and informal mentorship. So each recruit that attends our academy gets paired at the start. They all get to choose their own mentor. Sometimes they choose other women as women recruits, and sometimes they don't, but they all are encouraged and paired with someone of their choosing. And that someone can mentor them throughout their academy experience, but also and beyond. Mentor chairs have been selected, and they plan activities for the whole group, doing cookouts, family picnics, that kind of stuff, so that we really foster that relationship building with the families as well, and keeping them. Some other things we do, we also partner with the Wisconsin Association of Women Police and our college, UW-Madison, for a formal mentorship program with women in criminal justice. And so I know that I am one of those mentors, and I know that Sergeant Meg Hamilton is also one of those mentors for students at UW-Madison that want to career in policing. So it's a way for us to have a formal mentorship program as well to continue to build those relationships and maybe recruit women, more women out of that program to come for us. And then for something I think that is a little unique about Madison is that we also have very informal mentorships. So every year in the academy, we ask the prior female officers to take out our current female officers, whether that be bowling or some type of extracurricular activity, so that they really continue to foster that relationship and continue to build that internal network of women. And then I also want to talk about our new moms. So the city of Madison offers 6 weeks of paid parental leave after having a child, both for moms and fathers who work here. This informal group of moms shares information on how to maximize their leave time, their return to work plans, as we also offer new moms flexible return to work options. And what that looks like for some can be a part-time shift, so to speak. So you might work 4 hours from home and then 4 hours on FMLA time. It allows the woman to return to a restricted duty status, allowing her body to heal, but also provides support for her as a new mom or a new dad for that matter. Something else that we've started as well in 2012, well, not in 2012, but when I started in 2012, moms were expressing breast milk on a bench in the locker rooms or near the toilet. We created comfort rooms as also a support system for women who need to express breast milk while they are working. And then kind of based off of that, I think because of our comfort rooms, because of the network of moms that are in this department, I just wanted to share a recent story about a young mother. She was an officer and has been an officer with us for about 4 years, and she was asked to sit on a oral board panel. Due to the timing, she asked if she would be allowed to pump in the room, and the male captain told her if she felt comfortable, absolutely. She returned with a very low profile pump underneath her shirt, continued to pump while they waited for the next applicant, and the captain had left the room. The male captain returned to the room, and if you've ever heard of a breast pump, you never forget the noise. And so he was committed, though, that he said if she felt comfortable, he was going to support whatever decision that she made. But in his mind, all he could think about was, how am I going to explain this noise to the candidate? Because there's no way I'm asking her to turn it off. I share this story on the simple fact that she did turn it off prior to the applicant coming in the room, but it goes to our culture at Madison that a young female officer of only 4 years on the department felt comfortable enough to express breast milk in a pump under her shirt with a captain that has been here for over 25 years and an outside community member. I will just leave you with this last slide. This is a recent photo of a female West Knights Patrol shift. The women in this photo sent this to our social media team, and the woman, I guess the fourth from the right or from the left is the sergeant, and the rest of the crew was all females. And so we are committed to the 30 by 30 initiative, and we will continue to push ourselves and get that last 2%. And I just want to thank you for your attention before I turn it over to Sergeant Meg Hamilton and Lieutenant Laura Vang for their We Are the 28 presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. McGarrah.
Thank you so much to Sergeant McGarrah. Good afternoon. My name is Meg Hamilton. I'm the Sergeant of Community Outreach for the Madison Police Department. I'm joined by my longtime friend, previous colleague, Vang, who was an officer at our agency and is now a lieutenant at the Wisconsin DNR. I'm going to be talking about one specific officer-led, very much grassroots officer recognition and recruitment effort that I feel fortunate that I was able to take part in beginning in 2020.
I'm going to just try to progress this PowerPoint slide here for a sec. As Meg introduced me, my name is Vang. I am a lieutenant with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources on the law enforcement division. I am part of the training section there. I am in charge of recruitment and do some training in our own very exclusive academy as well. Prior to being part of the Wisconsin DNR, I was colleagues with Sergeant McGarrah, and I was a subordinate of Sergeant Meg Hamilton. So spent my early career in law enforcement with the Madison Police Department. And now I've gone off and I've been almost 2 years with the Wisconsin DNR.
Laura and I are going to be co-presenting today on the project that we took on starting in fall of 2019. So the campaign was called We Are the 28. And in the course of this presentation, I first want to provide the group with a snapshot of what we're talking about when we discuss We Are the 28. It was a 1-year-long employee recognition effort. And also the second prong was a recruitment campaign. It was strategic. It was something that Laura and I undertook very deliberately and strategically in an effort to celebrate the commissioned women of Madison Police and then to use that as a platform for recruitment. We ended up running the campaign from January 1, 2020 to January 1 of 2021. And let's talk about timing. There was extraordinary obstacles and challenges that we ran into in 2020 that neither Laura nor I could ever have imagined. We were able to keep this campaign going because of the courage of the women that we were putting forth. And we always want to hold that up sort of first and foremost, that we weren't able to do this without the extraordinary women who were willing to put themselves forward in that tumultuous year. We did this campaign to send a message to our own agency and to the community that our 28% female commissioned workforce, it's fundamental to who we are. It's part of what makes Madison Police who we are. One of our sources of inspiration was the now viral Humans of New York social media campaign. And for those who aren't familiar with it, Humans of New York puts forth very candid photos of individuals that they're profiling. And then the campaign takes a storytelling approach, delving into people's identities, their experiences, things that they've encountered and had to overcome. It's an incredibly inspirational series. And if you're not familiar with it, still very much on Facebook, and there's a hard print book that's been created if you're not on social at all. So in the course of We Are the 28, Laura and I were able to feature 43 women who are on the commission side of the house for Madison Police. At the time, that comprised just under 1/3 of the total female workforce at Madison. We were able to garner 500,000 primary page views. And the reason I use that language is because there's no way to capture secondary shares. So if we put forth a feature that was shared 200 times, we're not able to capture in that number how many people additionally saw those shares. Just from our social media alone, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, 500,000 viewers. What we want to do today is outline our planning efforts, the strategies that we undertook, highlight some of the key themes that we were able to pull from this campaign, and then foremost, provide you with some takeaways in the event that your agency wants to undertake something that would be both a recruitment effort and recognizing some of the people that you already have in your workforce.
So as this campaign began, it started a little while ago. Before I left the Madison Police Department, I was a Community Outreach Resource Education Officer, CORE. This particular role, I was tasked with building relations with the community, finding out ways and approaches to connect better with youth, and having a big focus on populations of color and just underrepresented populations in general. I remember came to the table back in 2017, new to this team, wanting to really kind of talk about our department. I was really proud of our department in the sense of, I guess, I didn't know how many women were in our department at first in MPD. But the more important thing was, for a young man starting a career in law enforcement, the biggest and most influential leaders were female leaders, whether they were appointed leaders or just officers who reached out and supported me. And that was really important to me. I think, I don't think I would have noticed before, but I think being in this industry, you just naturally notice because it's dominated by men. And so I wanted to kind of recognize that. And I knew that Madison PD had more women than a national average at that time in 17, but didn't know how many. And so I brought that up, and since it wasn't a traditional outreach sort of approach, right? I mean, a lot of people might understand when we think about law enforcement outreach, we're looking at troubled neighborhoods, particular groups and demographics, more responsive. That's what law enforcement does, right? We're responsive to what we might see in the media or how the community is reacting. So no one really caught on with this outreach message that I was trying to put out there. In 2019, I was now under the supervision of Sergeant Hamilton, and one of the higher captains asked me to be a part of this committee that was intended to improve culture and morale, as if I could just hit a switch and suddenly change it. And I was reluctant to join because I knew that changing culture, like, that's such a powerful statement in and of itself. You can't just change it, nor can you really get together in a room with people to fully represent the entire group in which you want to change. But this leader really encouraged me and said that I had good contributions. And when I went to these meetings, we talked a lot about limitations, deficiencies, weaknesses of the department, or perhaps places where we needed to fix things. And I remember really coming to the table saying, why are we focusing on these deficiencies or limitations? Why are we not focusing on some of the strengths that we have? And so they're like, what does that mean, Laura? And I kind of said, well, back in the day, I wanted to really talk about how we have more women in our department, more than any other, greater than the national average of law enforcement agencies across the country. And so they liked it. They thought that was great. They thought it was cool to recognize that. And they didn't know exactly what I had in mind, but they liked the notion of really starting with strengths and not just focusing on limitations. So with all of that, that's how that kind of really began. And then moving forward, I knew that this had to stand on three pillars. First, it was with morale. I really wanted to recognize, again, the strong leadership and the strong women that has really set a good foundation in this department. By that rationale, I was hoping that, hopefully, that inspires people to stay and improve retention in general. It was a recruitment piece. I was a recruiter at the time as well, understanding that if we represent the people in our organization in this way, this might really encourage other individuals who are either looking at law enforcement or just, interested in a career, that they can be part of an organization that recognizes them for their identities as well. And then outreach, that's kind of a more blanket statement. I wanted to make a statement for our department as a whole, saying, hey, we stand by these fundamentals, we stand by these values, and despite, the patriarchal nature of this industry of law enforcement, we want to be a part of something bigger and recognize that, I get it, 28%. We wish it could be 50, but as I said earlier, I want to focus on some of our strengths.
I want to talk a bit about the pre-planning that went into We Are the 28. When you work on something behind the scenes and others see the end product, it's always helpful to go back and discuss strategy and, quite frankly, the sheer amount of time that is entailed for an effort like this. Laura and I sat down in the fall of 2019, and he was very adamant that we put to paper a vision of what we were trying to do. And I'm so grateful that we did, because the vision statement that I put up there became the North Star that we followed throughout the course of a very tumultuous 2020. We were asked individually and together many times, why are you doing this? And the question behind that is, what is your motivation? And sometimes the question was specifically, was this assigned to you? Are you trying to get promoted? Why are you doing this? And I'm grateful and remain grateful that we put to paper what we believed, because Laura and I were both able to message to different members of our shared agency why, a consistent why. And it was to highlight just some, not all, because we had so many, some of the extraordinary women of the commissioned Madison Police Department. And then as the second prong, use that recognition as a platform for additional recruitment. And I used to say to people, this is not a me, this is not a Lore, this is a for us. It's not a for one of us, it's for all of us. The strategy, the way that we accomplished our social media campaign was coming up with innovative monthly social media content. What that meant was that Laura and I went out and hit the streets and we talked to people, and we found by positionality and internal regard within our agency, women who we wanted to highlight, and we pitched it to them. We said, we're going to do this campaign. Before we had a brand, we called it the Women's Initiative. We're going to do this campaign. We're going to put forth some of the extraordinary women of MPD. We would like to put forth you because you're a veteran. You've been here a long time. Positionality, people respect you. You're held in high regard. Will you do this? And we found, to our great joy, many people wanted to. So then when we got people who agreed to be part of it, we scheduled what I can only call an in-depth interview, at least an hour, sometimes two. We would sit down, or when COVID hit, do by phone, an interview in which we would ask people, how did you come to policing? What do you feel like makes you who you are? What experiences do you bring to this profession and to your role that have value to you and make you who you are? Then we listened. We heard how people represented themselves, what they held to be the most important things in their life. Then we wrote down some of that in a narrative. Most importantly, after we wrote it down, we showed the person and said, this is what we came up with. This is how we'd like to present you. Are you okay with that? Because that part is pivotal. We don't ever want to put forth someone and ask them to be put forth for public dissemination without hearing from them that they're comfortable with it. Lastly, we took a fresh, candid photo. We did it with an iPhone, Laura and I, and we put forth that photo and a story, what I would often call a vignette of the person's life, and we cultivated content for all of 2020. This is the first item of content that we put forth, January 1st of 2020. The photo that you see here was organized by the patrol lieutenant of the Midtown District Station, which is one of our 7 MPD buildings. That was the commissioned women of that particular district station in 2019. We put forth this photo and the accompanying language, and I'm going to let you read this for a moment. This was our statement of intent. This was us telling the community, we have 28% and that's extraordinary, but also we're a lot more than that number. We hold all of these identities. We occupy these spaces in your community, which is our community. And for the next 12 months, we're going to recognize some of the remarkable women here. There are social media analytics, which Laura and I learned a lot about during this campaign. Facebook specifically can tell when users have stopped scrolling and read something or looked at a photo. Our MPD social media analytics showed that 50,000 people read or looked at the initial rollout post. That was not a number that we expected to see. And we benefited from the fact that so many people saw it Local Madison media picked up the story in the month of January. There was 2 follow-up news stories, including one that one of our legacy female canine handlers did. Also, veteran day shift female patrol officers, who I know for a fact never gave an interview with the news, were willing to talk about their identity as being part of the We Are the 28. We were very much lifted up by this initial rollout. And in February, Laura and I decided that we wanted to put forth content that we thought would be especially interesting to people in the community. And that was the concept that MPD had at that time, and still does, 3 pairs of sisters. And those are the images that you see up on your screen. On the left side are 2 patrol officers. One was just promoted to sergeant. In the center is a sergeant and a lieutenant. And on the right is a detective and a sergeant. These are all women who continue to be with our agency and continue to be ambassadors of the female commissioned members of MPD. March was a particularly significant month for us, and we put a tremendous amount of planning into social media rollout. March is Women's History Month and it's International Women's Day. Some of the things that we did included reaching out to MPD retirees, who we called Trailblazers. It was the Trailblazers edition, to put forth, if they were willing, photos of retirees who blaze the trail for those of us who are still working here. And I'm going to be candid in saying people came out of the woodwork. Every day I would open up my work email and see new photos, some from women I had heard of, some from women I had never heard of. Particularly powerful, we have some female retired couples who wanted to be pictured together as a statement of their identity and their investment as retired Madison police personnel. We put those forth and we called it She Before We. The photo on the right was taken in January of 2020. We were able to get 70% of our female commissioned workforce in one place for this photo. In April, we featured some of the female members of the Crisis Negotiator Team, which is one arm of our SWAT team. The power of the photos that you see in front of you speak to their identities. The women depicted here chose these photos because they represent key aspects of their life. The woman on the left, as you can see, had twin girls. The woman in the center chose that because it's a beloved vacation spot for she and her family. The woman on the right has rescue pit bulls that she loves as children. She really wanted to be photographed with them. And we heard that when we spoke to people and asked about how we could best depict them. These are themes that came forward, that people wanted the roles that they held and the things that were near to them in their life to be depicted as well. And we honored that.
Our mental health unit is a special unit that we have, and I'm fully aware that not all departments may have them. This was a very special photo for us, or month for us, as we featured the mental health unit, comprised mostly of women. I believe at this time there was just one male mental health officer. So we really wanted to just feature that entire unit. We were able to actually get them all together and for an image as well, to kind of show the community again that we had a mental health unit, period, and then who made up that group. So as you're keeping track of things, this is June of 2020. It's very interesting. If you remember, in May of 2020, a lot of things were going on with law enforcement. So Pride Month was very special to all of us. And we had individuals who chose to be represented for Pride Month. And it was great because they really were very proud of their identities as well. However, given what was going on in 2020, especially around May and June, all of the demonstrations and activity going on, a lot of individuals were kind of hesitant as well of showing themselves. So that's why these images are a little different. They're not face on and you can't quite identify them, but they still told their stories. And we're happy to be featured for Pride Month. And many of them expressed how grateful they were that we were even recognizing this in the entire We Are the 28 initiative as well.
In summer, we wanted to be very intentional about putting forth women who were on the front lines. So the women of patrol services, the women who were neighborhood officers, who are out every day in the summer dealing with high stakes calls, as summer is the busy season. The woman on the right in the photograph, specifically on the right side of that photograph, is now a lieutenant. That's Jen Hanna. She was a sergeant working patrol at the time that she was featured. This photo is particularly significant, and here is why. When Laura and I started approaching women who had agreed to be featured, but were going to be featured after civil unrest had started in Madison, we were careful to say, we understand if you want to pull back, if you're not comfortable doing this, or if the content that you already agreed upon, if you want to adjust anything. I sent that exact language to Jen Hanna, and her emailed response back to me was 2 words. It said, run it. And I think about that as an act of courage. Jen Hanna, who was in the field, Jen Hanna, who is responding to active civil unrest on numerous occasions in Madison, telling us in June of 2020 that we could run a photo of she and her wife in July of 2020. And we could talk about her life and her story and put this photo of her wedding day. The woman in the center is a longtime day shift patrol officer. When we shared her profile, the community that she grew up in shared it and shared it and shared it. And the captions that they attached to her profile read similar to, "This is our Dana. We are so proud of her." Talk about investment in your officers, in their identities, in what they're trying to do, serving the communities that they came from and the communities that they work in. Lastly, the woman on the left-hand side is Alex Nieves Reyes, a neighborhood officer at the time, now a patrol officer. In her feature, she talked at length about experiencing homelessness as a child and living in a shelter for about 2 years. She recounted to me the exact date, which she said she'll remember forever, when her family got an apartment. She was a teenager. So these themes, people putting themselves and their identities forward, people talking about incredibly vulnerable topics like homelessness and their own journeys, they were a powerful force throughout this campaign. In September, we wanted to be very intentional about featuring our current MPD Academy class. As Sergeant Megara talked about earlier, this class had 50 people in it. At the time that I took the photograph you're looking at, there was 18 women. I asked the training staff if I could come out on the day that the recruits were at rifle instruction, because we wanted to depict an image of the current women in the academy class doing something that isn't a soft skill. I think we're all very familiar with sometimes seeing female officers depicted interviewing victims, walking with children, doing things that are somewhat stereotypically female. I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to show the women of our current academy class undertaking a skill set that was necessary and in a role that women aren't typically shown in. I went to the rifle range. I asked the 18 women who wanted to take part. They all did. This was still COVID times, and our city mandated face masks. That's why they're wearing them. We released this image in September, and of the entire campaign, it generated the most likes and positive comments. It also attracted the attention of a few detractors. Of those detractors, 1 or 2 reached out to the mayor's office and the chief's office and demanded that MPD take this photo down. My captain, then and now, and I spoke for about an hour on a Sunday after this post ran. And he asked me if we needed to take it down. And I explained why we needed to not, that I felt so strongly we needed to keep it up because of what it was depicting, its purpose, its power, and the way in which it was being received. And he supported keeping it up, and so did our chief. And this imagery stuck, even though we had a few community detractors. In October, we featured the women who work in the SI lab, who process crime scenes, take photos and evidence. These women are an extraordinary bunch. They have street credibility like you wouldn't believe. I would say half of our patrol cops are actively afraid of them, and they should be. These are people who are powerful and work around the clock and have great subject matter expertise. When I approached them and asked if they would take part, thinking they might not want to take part, they agreed, but they wanted to do it their own way. And Laura and I loved that. They used their own vintage camera from the SI lab with their own vintage film at their own photo shoot and submitted their own photo. And I love that. It says so much about the autonomy of this unit and the power of this unit. This is the photo that they chose, that they wanted to put forth.
As you can see with some of the themes that we have, it's very important that we just had representation, not just, for the very active and talked about groups and identities out there, but just really how our individual officers identified themselves. Now, of course, we really want to see veteran officers and new officers represented. Individuals from all different ranks. We have many special units that we have, and we want to show that off in the sense of, yeah, you can be anybody and be a part of any of these specialty units, whether that's a negotiator, a canine unit, forensics. And then, as you can see, Sergeant Megara is featured here on the right in her very own feature. Of course, a fantastic athlete who we were really proud to showcase as well as being the sergeant of our training unit. And so this was really the biggest thing, is the representation. And as you can kind of glean from it, they were in charge of how they were represented. It was very important for us and for the community to see these individuals the way that they saw themselves. And without that, we probably wouldn't have pushed forward with this. We didn't want to write their narrative.
2020 was a year of such unbelievable challenges. Laura and I felt like we would be remiss in not tackling some of those challenges head on. I put up on one slide several of the most significant things, and when I looked at them in hindsight, I still can't believe all that 2020 held. In January, MPD experienced for the first time ever the suicide of an active member of our organization. Laura served on the honor guard. I was the sergeant of peer support. We were heavily involved in the response after Nick passed away. In March, the COVID lockdown began here in Wisconsin. In May, specifically on Sunday, May 31st, was the beginning of our period of nightly protests, which sometimes segued into very active civil unrest. I checked with our criminal intelligence unit to get the exact number. We had 170 consecutive nights of protests, several of which turned into active rioting and civil unrest. I was the only person left in community outreach. Everyone else was pulled to work the street. I was left in community outreach because I was 5 months pregnant. In October, I had my baby, and then I was out for 2 months. And in November, the small team that Laura and I worked in, which only had a total of 5 people, experienced another tragedy. One of our current team members was off duty, hit by a car, and nearly killed, and her wife was killed on scene. Despite all of these things, any one of which would have been enough to stop our efforts, we felt so strongly we had to keep going, that we were doing something worth doing, and that the timing needed to not be the negating factor. Sorry, we're going to go back to the last slide to talk about some of the challenges. While I navigate my technology, I'll have more start on that.
It's all good. Yeah, that was a question. What kind of kickback did you get internally, and how do we combat that? Oh yeah, naturally, you get the questions. All right, you want to do a feature on women? What about the men? What about people of color? What about this? If you're going to do all of that, what are you going to do for everybody else? And I remember when I first talked about this, and this was to a longstanding captain who had asked me that question. What about the men then? Being new, I simply said, this is not about the men. This is about women in our organization, and I believe that we really should feature them and represent them in the way that they want to be represented. I didn't say anything against men. I said we can do an initiative that way too. If someone feels passionate enough to do something like that, go ahead. But this project is not about that. You know, when asked about certain other identities, people of color? What about an initiative for Asian officers or Latino officers? And I would snap back with, if you think you can just interchange someone's identity into certain initiatives, you're missing the whole point here. This is very intentional, very aware of what we have. And it's not just something that we're going to just switch anything, a certain identity with. And Meg, I think you had something to add in this slide as well.
Yeah, thanks for speaking to that piece. As Laura and I were recounting some of the resistance that we encountered, a big one that stood out to me was the assertion that MPD already had so many women, with the insinuation being, so why keep going? And my response to that ended up being my genuine feeling, which is, when we're at 50%, I think we can stop talking about it. When we actually get to the juncture where we accurately represent the community that we're serving, we can stop talking about it. We do want to provide a few key takeaways, and I put them up on the screen here. The first one, and the only one that I'm going to just read verbatim, is the value of your agency, our agency, every police agency. It's in its people. It's certainly not in our technology. It's in the people who work there. You don't need a budget. You don't need a marketing team. You don't need PR to put those people forth in a planful, intentional, uplifting way. And you need to see people for who they are. Recognize the fact that we come to work, we wear the same uniform, but we bring so much with us, our identities, our experiences. And when you recognize that in people, that they're more than just the uniform they wear, you lift them up and you see them as being appreciated and worthy of being put forth. I want to reflect one last time on 2020 and the fact that in 2020, there were so many reasons to not do something like this, but we did. We made time for it. So the last takeaway that we would ask of the people who are listening to us today is innovation is going to come at inconvenient and challenging times. If you're a supervisor, think of ways that you can foster it, even if it's not something that you can take on. If you're a line level worker, don't feel like you can't have innovative ideas to put forth, even if there are many challenges and many avenues of things that need your attention. Lastly, you don't have to have membership in any group to be a meaningful advocate and to affect change. I want to talk briefly about the man who's on the upper left-hand side. He was MPD's social media coordinator at the time that Laura and I were running We Are the 28. He was an integral part of this. He created our brand. Tyler came up with We Are the 28, and that brand came to epitomize not just the campaign, but what we were trying to do. I also put up on the screen a few of the commanders. On the lower left was Ben, Chief Wall, who never took down any of the pieces that we put forward. He never asked that we do. I also put my own captain, Matt Ty, and his boss, Assistant Chief John Patterson, up there. They never censored us. They never asked us to change a word. Also on the right side of the screen, closest to the word change, is my other half, a detective with Madison. I would often tell him that he was the unofficial third member of We Are the 28. Because of positionality, he's a detective and I'm not, he could reach members of the department that I couldn't and put forth the idea that they too should be highlighted. And it planted the seed for when I later asked people in fall of 2020 if they would take part. We had a number of detectives who were willing to. Lastly, the man who is on the lower left, closest to the word "and" in the third line, was the commander the day that we took the large group photo. He was willing to put the city of Madison on priority calls for service so that as many women as possible could attend the large group photo. That is buy-in. This photo means everything to me, and I'm going to tell you why. This was the day in January of 2020 that we convened as many women as possible to take a large group photo. It was a cold day. This is January in Wisconsin. Also, cops don't like to be photographed. We were an hour in, people are getting irritated, they want to be done. The officer who was taking the photos had just promised one last photo, so he took it and the women started dispersing. And I shouted at the top of my lungs in the cold January wind, "Everyone just stop for a minute. Before you leave, I'd like to bring Laura in for a picture, because without Laura, we wouldn't even be doing this." And there was a pause, and then the women clapped and they cheered. And they asked for him to not only be in the picture, but they demanded that he come to the front. This photo hangs in my office, and it is the best representation that I can put forth of how you do not have to have membership in a group to be an authentic, genuine, and credible messenger for change. Laura and I are frequently asked where we are now. At the time that Laura and I worked together on We Are the 28, he was an officer who worked for me. Laura did this campaign and many other tremendous initiatives and received job offers elsewhere. He ultimately took one, and he's now a lieutenant at the state of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. He manages statewide recruitment efforts. And I'm so grateful to have called him back literally to an MPD training building today so that we could put forth this presentation, which we worked on for so long.
It was easy to come back. Meg and I had a very strong professional relationship, and we're really obviously proud of this initiative that we took. I've always said to Meg, you know, I would love to be in a position someday to help you out as well. And so I was very proud to be able to write a letter of recommendation for Meg for the New Blue Fellowship as well. And so as was mentioned earlier in this entire segment that we've had this webinar, it's great to see Meg go and do wonderful things, but it's also just fun to work back with Meg and cover some of the things that we have done in the past.